What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As you can see from the title today, Maitreya with guest Gary from Search for Signs, and this will be basically the second interview. That might be him waiting. Let me go ahead and drop the StreamYard link. If that's you, Gary, it's just the same process as last time. I'm going to drop this link, and you just click it. If that's not Gary, we'll wait for him to get here. But he should be here momentarily. All right, we'll give him a few minutes, see if that's him. All right, that might not be him yet, so we'll just give it a few minutes here. Yeah, it's gonna be a good interview today. We had a really good interview a couple weeks ago now, almost a month ago. All right, that must not be him. Yep, that wasn't him, guys. All right. Yeah, we just gotta sit here until he gets here. Sorry for the long pauses and stuff, guys, but I just gotta sit here until he shows up. Let me check my email just in case he wasn't able to make it or something. Hey, if that's you, Gary, same process as last time. You just click the StreamYard link in the box there. Yep, there we go. All right, let me add him to the stage.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Yeah, I was sorry. I'm using my iPad. I had to download the SteamYard app.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It took me a
Oh,
second.
oh, wow. So they make you download it on iPad?
Yeah, I think I had used my iPhone during
Oh,
the
okay.
last one. So anyway.
Yeah, with iPhone, you can just click right onto it for some reason and go
Oh,
in.
is that right?
Yeah,
Okay. Anyway, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How you been?
Doing fine. Doing fine. So, what's up?
Just figured we'd have a round two, ask some different questions and stuff this time, and pick your brain a little.
So it's going to be a Sunday afternoon SmackDown. Got it. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
nothing too crazy. Just some stuff I had forgot last time, and then some
I'm.
stuff I had heard on some of your recent videos and stuff.
I am excited. I am excited. So I was looking forward to it all weekend.
Awesome, great. So we'll start out. What did you think of that Kathleen Keating video I had told you about?
I watched it. It was acting funny because it would like record. It would show a little, like maybe a minute or two of it, and then it would keep playing, but it would go back and play the same thing over again.
Oh
So
wow,
I was able to get enough of it. I have to say, James, I think you said it the best. Paranoia is scary.
yeah,
So, um, a lot of people they kind of hard to explain. I have such a broad view on it that it's hard for me to articulate it sometimes without going off on a tangent. But
no, go
when
ahead. Like I said, I
when
say whatever you need to.
yeah, when it comes to those kind of things, and it could be anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be about Maitreya. I don't. I think that they don't really understand they don't understand what they're seeing is not really what's going on. And I've been around enough people in my life, whether it's through work or whatever, where they you might not say anything and they are sure you said something. Does that make sense? And it's like, what
Yeah,
are they what and I guess I guess I've done the same thing in my life where I thought for sure somebody said something and then maybe they didn't, or maybe they didn't do that what I thought they did,
yeah,
and when you have a lot of I think probably mental instability, and then you multiply it with a lot of fear and a lot of a lifetime of people telling you exactly what the truth is with religion or spirituality, and that the world is going to end, and there's this antichrist coming, and then you read something, and the thing that I kept wanting to hear in the video was I'm assuming she was talking about the organization that was backed up by the UN was Share International, right?
Correct. I believe so.
Okay,
Yes.
but yeah, Share International is not funded by any elites. I mean,
Yeah, that's why I'd asked you last interview if Maitreya was tied into UN, because I believe I had heard her say that in the past.
nah, I mean, the UN, we can talk about the UN in a second. I was just going to say
Okay.
this too about Share International. I can't remember if I mentioned this on your show the last time, but there was a time when Ben came to Atlanta. It was the first time that he had come to Atlanta that I was a part of the group that put on the talk, and
Okay.
it was at this mall, and they had it was at this New Age mall, and they had this little banquet room, I guess, where they'd have talks or whatever like that. So he had his thing there, and there's about 100 or so people in this thing. I was the one running the sound because I was a
Okay.
musician, and a friend of mine rented the equipment from him, the recording equipment and the couple speakers and the mixing table. So I was sitting in the back of the room, and I was in charge of the lights.
Okay.
And so Ben, did I tell you this the last time? I can't
No, but
remember.
I've heard you say it a few years ago that you used to be in a band and you traveled like across the
Oh, okay.
country, correct?
Not across the country, but in Japan and everything. But
Japan, that's right. Japan, that's right.
yeah,
Something
but
crazy happened in Japan, didn't it?
yeah, we can talk about that too if you want.
I remember hearing that years ago. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, in this situation, so Ben was giving the talk, and before the talk, he said, he goes, "Okay, Gary, when Maitreya overshadows me, I don't want all the lights on. So let's go through all the lights and see how bright it is." So he said, "Just turn them all off." And it was pitch black in the room. He goes, "Okay, now turn that one on." He goes, "Okay, a little bit more. Turn that one on." He goes, "That's perfect." So I remembered the series of lights that he wanted me to turn on. Right. So it was just a couple of the fluorescent lights in the ceiling is what he wanted on.
Okay.
And anywho, so when it came time for him to be overshadowed, he was always overshadowed by Maitreya to give a blessing at the end of each talk and every lecture. And he kind of motioned to me to turn the lights down. And I leaned back in my chair and I turned like all the lights off except for two of them. And then he
Okay.
was overshadowed by Maitreya. Well, anyway, this guy who was a religious fundamentalist saw the overshadowing of Maitreya. He saw this golden light around Ben and wrote it up on his website at the time that we must have had this sophisticated lighting in the system, cost tens of thousands of dollars to be able to fool him. And I was like, yeah, the sophisticated lighting was me leaning back in a chair and turning the lights off.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's kind of like that, so when people have this, this trust of everything, it spills over into every aspect of their life. Whether she saw Maitreya outside her house or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it was Maitreya, because Maitreya wouldn't necessarily hang around if somebody was scared.
Okay. So
Typically,
the description she gave didn't sound anything like him.
I mean, he's tall and slender, but that could be
Yeah.
anybody,
Okay.
and does he wear nice suits? Yeah, he wore, the time I saw him in the parking lot, he wasn't wearing an Armani suit. He was wearing a sweater that I used to call it the Bill Cosby sweater. It was really
Yeah.
it was really colorful, and
Yeah.
he had a dark charcoal colored pants or slacks on, and he was standing next to a BMW.
Oh, okay.
And the funny thing with Maitreya, when he a lot of the experiences that I've had and a lot of the experiences that other people had that wrote into Share National, some of them are quite funny. Some of
Oh, I
them
bet.
are quite impactful or meaningful or deep. Other ones are more uplifting or all of the above. And when Maitreya appears as whatever he does, every aspect of that encounter is to teach the person something, whether it's a prejudice that they might have. So, for instance, if they don't like people who smoke, he might be smoking a cigarette.
Okay.
If they're perhaps not that generous and sharing and they're a little stingy, he might keep asking them for small amounts of money, like a quarter. Hey, can I get another
Okay.
quarter, or a specific amount, like $1.26? Can I have $1.26? And then they say, sure. Let's say they thought it was Maitreya. Like, oh yeah, I'll give him $1.26. He seems like he's Maitreya or whatever, right? For whatever reason, they had that thought. And then you go, hey, can I get $1.26? This happened several times with people. And so they would eventually start to get annoyed that he kept asking for the same amount. Well, anyway,
Okay.
the reason why he was leaning next to a BMW, James, is I hate BMW drivers. They are the most aggressive drivers on the road. And this happened in 93. So I still haven't learned my lesson. So everybody in my family knows that I can't stand BMW drivers because when I'm driving, they'll cut you off. They do all sorts of stuff. You know what I mean? So he
So
had,
basically he pulled up in a BMW on purpose
well, he didn't pull up. He materialized
or
it
materialized.
behind me. So
Oh, the car and
basically
everything?
everything.
Oh
So
wow.
that experience, what happened with that one was, I don't know if you know, if you ever heard the word conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Oh
so,
yeah.
so right when I started getting involved in reading Benjamin Krem's work, a friend of mine took me to this conspiracy theorist talk, talking
Okay.
about the Illuminati taking over the world, all this stuff. Oh, the woman
Yeah.
taking over the world.
Bilderbergs, all that, yeah.
Correct. And so I was kind of shaky on the information from Ben, and I was listening to this, and fear is contagious. So that fear rubbed off on me. So I started to get kind of fearful. I was like, is this true or not? And I didn't really this was a long time ago that this happened. Anyway, so one of the conspiracy theories that this person said at this talk was when you go to court or if you're arrested by a cop, they always ask you how old you are. And when you say your age, you're claiming an incorporation under the statutory law or something to that effect. It's
Yeah.
been so long since I followed this. Anyway,
Basically through a social security or a corporation, social security number.
yeah, something to that effect. So I was really worried about it. And I asked Maitreya one time when I was driving, I said, I thought to myself, I said, which is true? Is this what Ben is saying true? That it's a lot of hope out there, that the world's going to come together and, unify, or is it this dystopian nightmare that these conspiracy theorists think, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, no, don't worry about it. Well, anyway, not too long after that, I was going into an African store to get a drum called a djembe, and this store was in a Walmart parking lot,
Okay.
and it was during the week, and there wasn't a lot of cars there in the front of the Walmart. But where I was going into, there was probably maybe 3 cars,
Okay.
and I kind of parked a few spaces back from the front of the store. I get out of my car and I'm walking about to go into this store, and I turn around and I hear this from behind me. I hear this, "How old are you?" And I went, "What?" And I turned. That's when I saw Maitreya, and he looked exactly like Ben had described him in the book. Now, I did not read the description of Maitreya until after this experience, so I didn't put this there. It was just he looked about 30-ish,
Okay.
to maybe 35. Couldn't really tell his age. He looked young, but he didn't look immature. He looked very old and wise in his eyes, but his face and his features seem young, right?
Okay.
Middle Eastern, of course.
Has he always been Middle Eastern looking, or is he different the couple times you've seen him?
I've seen him in all sorts of shapes and sizes, as an African American woman, as an old man, as a young boy. Yeah. So, but in London, he looks a certain way. And Ben had described him almost exactly the same way that I saw him. His face looked like the Maitreya Buddha statues that you could see online. Kind of a bigger forehead and a small chin, small mouth, with a very thin kind of mustache. He could wear a mustache. I always tell people that wear a mustache, there's only a couple of people in the world that can wear one: Saddam Hussein and Tom Selleck. Well, he's the other one that could wear a mustache. Yeah, it's like, you see it, but you don't really see it on him, kind of deal.
Yeah, okay.
I can never pull off the mustache look, but anyway. So he had that, and then his hair was curly and dark, but had kind of the wet look to it.
Okay.
And then he was wearing this really nice, colorful sweater, these really nice slacks, standing next to the cleanest BMW I've ever seen. And he said, "How old are you again?" And I said, "Are you asking me how old am I, or how am I?" And this time he didn't open his mouth, and I heard it in my head. It was ringing between my right ear and my left ear, like a flange. And it said, "How old are you?" And I heard it louder than my own thoughts, but I noticed that his mouth did not move. And
so did you hear it in your head, or you heard it audibly, like in your ears from like the outside?
That third time I heard it audibly. I heard it in my head.
Okay.
The other times it sounded like, he was saying it to me.
Okay.
And I said, I don't know if you're asking me how old am I or how am I? So I am 23 years old, which I'm 52 now. So that tells you how long ago that was. I said,
Yeah, I'm 45. So yeah.
45. So I said, I'm 23 and I'm fine. And he crosses his arms. He looks up at the sky and he goes, what a glorious day. It is so beautiful. God bless you and God bless America. You have a wonderful day.
Wow.
And that was the end of it. But he appeared out of nowhere. Because I mean, when I got out of my car, there was no BMW there. So he didn't just drive up there. He materialized it, according to what Ben said. And then he disappeared. When I went into the store and came back out, he was gone. But yeah, that one was kind of an interesting experience, like I said, because he looked like him,
Okay.
But so what I'm saying is I guess my point is that we really have nothing to worry about. These conspiracy theories that people have about something taking over, the United Nations taking over. There's no truth to any of that stuff, according to what Ben's master said, that the United Nations will eventually be the arbiter of debates between nations. And so nations will learn to work out their problems peacefully through discussion, but it's going to take every nation having a vote. And this is where the injustice comes in with the Security Council can veto any policy or thing that they're putting forth to the group. Yeah. Any nation on the Security Council can veto it, right? And so basically the United States, China, Britain, France, I guess Russia, is on the Security Council. They have a greater voice than, let's say, Zimbabwe. And according to the masters, every nation should have an equal say in what they do.
Okay.
In the United Nations, but the United Nations will eventually be. I always talk about the principle of sharing. Eventually, according to Ben's master, there will be a master heading up the United Nations, and then there'll be a different master that will be a part of and heading up the principle of sharing through the United Nations. So where every nation will make an inventory of what they have in excess and what they need, and that nation will then put it into a common pool where any nation can pull from it. So, for instance, if Iraq needed corn, but they had excess natural gas or oil or lithium or whatever they have, they could put correct. And so that's how the principle of sharing would eventually look, according to the masters.
Okay. Real quick, I have a follower. He asked, he's from New Zealand. He said, sorry, mate, I'm not quite following. Would you mind quickly explaining who Gary is? Could you do a real quick synopsis? Sure. Basically, yeah.
Well, first of all, how you doing from New Zealand? Wow, that's a long way away from where I'm at, I'm sure. But anyway, who am I? I'm just an ordinary guy with extraordinary information. And what I talk about and have been talking about for years is the one awaited by all the world's religions, that the world teacher Maitreya is here, and have been talking about him along with thousands of other people around the world, some in New Zealand even. There's a Share International group in New Zealand that's quite active, that put out the information about Maitreya and the masters, about the need to share, about the need for peace. Does that explain it, or I need to go in deeper than that? Or
does that help out a little, Stefan? Yeah, I'm sure that helps him. Yeah. Have you ever heard of Guy Ballard?
I have, but I don't know much about him.
Okay, so basically he was in the Mount Shasta area in the 30s. He said one day he was out hiking. He bent over to tie his shoe. He said he felt electricity basically shoot from his head to his toe. Mm-hmm. And when he turned around, there was a young man behind him who offered him a drink. And he says the guy told him he was Saint Germain and he was an ascended master. Mm-hmm. So I was curious, is that the same ascended masters that's with Maitreya?
Well, the ascended masters are a very devotional way of looking at these masters. Okay, so I don't necessarily buy the information coming from people claiming to channel ascended masters and so forth. Yeah, they're kind of, and some of them are kind of thrown in there. They're made up. They're not really any of the masters. So there might be an ascended master that's not, that they talk about, that's not one of the masters of wisdom. But most of the people that talk about the ascended masters got the information from Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey back in the 20s and the 30s. and then kind of took some spins on it and tried to make it their own. And oh, now I'm channeling these masters and those kind of things.
Yeah,
Now,
which is common with every type of situation
yeah,
like that. You have people that pop in. Yeah, for sure.
correct. Now the who they refer to as ascended master Saint Germain, actually was the Saint Germain is the first master that I came across when I was watching the TV show In Search of. Did you ever see that movie In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, where he
Yeah,
was?
that sounds really familiar.
And it was on PBS, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it wasn't on PBS. It was on one of these shows in the weekends, and I used to love watching it. But anyway, there was this one that I remember from back in the 70s. They talked about Saint Germain and who was Saint Germain and this that. Well, Saint Germain was actually a person who lived in Eastern Europe back, I don't know, several hundred years ago, and was kind of this enigmatic figure, or this mysterious figure that was around the courts, the European courts at the time, and was invited into a lot of kings and queens' palaces and those kind of things. And the thing
He had
that
ties. Then he had the real one. He had ties to the Catholic Church. The one you're talking about, correct?
well, they didn't really get into it in search of in terms of that. They were just talking about
Okay.
him in these regards. But the one thing that I remember that was quite astounding was he didn't eat any meat or drink wine. So every time he
Okay.
would go to these events, he would eat fruit as these people were engorging themselves, in food and desserts
Yeah.
and alcohol and stuff. And he would just eat a little bit. And then he, according to In Search of, and this is where they were trying to find what happened to him, was he just walked up into the mountains and nobody had ever heard him again. Well, Saint Germain was the last life of one of the masters. He's the master Rakuzi, who will be out known along with these other masters once Maitreya introduces them.
How many masters are there?
There are 7 times 7, so there's 49 plus Maitreya in the world. Well,
Okay.
in of the hierarchy here, but there's only 14 of them in the world right now.
Okay.
So he's one of those the master Saint Germain was Francis Bacon. Do you know who Francis Bacon was?
Yeah.
The literate, and he
Yeah.
was also Roger Bacon, who was a previous incarnation of Rakuzi. So,
Okay.
and according to Alice Bailey, he's kind of a managing director of the hierarchy on this planet. He has that kind of role. So he's not
Okay.
really a teacher like most people on the Ascended Masters group. They pray to Saint Germain. They think they're getting all this wonderful information from Saint Germain, but he is actually more of a administrator than an actual teacher in that way. So he might be one that heads up the principle of sharing or the United Nations once Maitreya comes out. He'd be more like in line with that kind of thing. But he,
Okay.
I'm trying to think some other things about him. I said there's 14 masters in the world. Okay. Maitreya has been in the world since July 19th, 1977. But
Yeah. They say he came down from the Himalayas, correct?
correct. So all these masters. So basically, what happened? Let me go back. Actually, probably as for this gentleman in New Zealand, I probably should go back and give a history lesson of the masters. But the masters have been here since humanity started on this planet 18.5 million years ago, according to the ageless wisdom teaching. So scientists and religious folks have put the origins of humanity on this planet much differently, right? So the religious folks here in the United States would say that the people have been around for about 5 or 6, 7,000 years, according to the Bible, right? And then you look at scientists, and most anthropologists would say that we're probably 150, 200,000 years old.
Yeah.
Well, those numbers are pale in comparison to what we really are. We're actually 18.5 million years. And so there have been two great civilizations prior to this one. The first one being the Lemurian civilization.
Yeah.
And then the Atlantean civilization, and now we're starting another civilization kind of thing. But anyway, so for million,
sorry to cut you off. What did they say happened to Atlantis?
yeah, I was going to get to that. So
Okay, awesome.
the masters early on were from other planets, mainly Venus and Mars, Saturn and Jupiter.
Okay.
And they made up the hierarchy on this planet because humanity was still basically early animal man and had very little, what we would say, a mind that separates us from an animal, right? very
Yeah.
little. And as we started to evolve over millions of years, we became quite spiritual, yet we weren't technologically that advanced, perhaps didn't know much about anything, but we had a spiritual understanding that we don't have today. So back millions of years ago, according to Ben's master, the word to steal did not exist in our lexicon of, in a language, any language, because nobody saw anything as their possessions. I mean, it was basically almost like the Indians, I guess, would have, kind of the way they kind of lived, right? So they lived very spiritual, very connected to nature and so forth. Well, anyway, then we started the Atlantean civilization. I think it was about 4 million years ago, 5 million years, something like that. And that's when we started to become more of what we are today, where we were not as evolved as we are today, but in terms of our consciousness, the way we saw the world, that's where we still are kind of relating back to. So the masters, then we started to become evolved enough to become masters ourselves. And Maitreya became the first of our evolution to become a master a couple million years ago, according to what Ben's master said. And then more and more people started.
So he was the first of. Before that, was he like a regular human?
Yeah, he was the first. Yeah, he was a part of our. Okay. He came out of our evolution, and so he was the first of our evolution to become a master, according to Ben. And then about 100,000 years ago, there was a great war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, because humanity was being influenced equally by the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And there was a huge war. It was a stalemate. It resulted in the destruction of Atlantis, or symbolized in the Bible as the flood. Noah was a master that was warning people that this continent was going to be destroyed. Anyway, it was destroyed, and then the peoples dispersed. The masters made an agreement with the lords of materiality that neither of them would influence humanity directly for a time, and they stepped away from humanity and influenced humanity indirectly through their disciples in the world. So for the last 100,000
lords of materiality, sorry.
We'll talk about them in a second. Yeah, we'll talk about them in a second. I don't know much about them per se. They are masters like the masters of wisdom, but they're devoid of love.
Okay, and also, if you can fit in, who do they consider the forces of good and evil? Who do they consider that?
The masters of wisdom that I refer to, that are headed up by Maitreya, are the forces of light, or the forces, what you would say, the forces of good. Okay. And the forces of materiality have a role to play on this planet. They keep the planet together, materially wise, but where their work and activity become evil is when they start to influence and restrict the evolutionary path of humanity. That's where they become what's called evil. So anyway, so that war that happened, that resulted in the destruction of Atlantis, also resulted in the masters on both sides retreating and into remote areas of the world. So the masters of wisdom went into the deserts of the world, the mountains of the world. So that's why there's so much folklore about these masters in the Himalayas, because that's where the majority of them went to. Very remote areas of the world. Some went into the Andes, the Rockies, the Urals, the Carpathians, the Gobi deserts, and some of the other deserts in the world. And since then had been influencing humanity indirectly through their disciples in the world. So according to the masters, any man or woman throughout history that did some kind of impact in the world, whether it was political, religious, spiritual, teaching of some kind, a political movement, a social movement, arts, sculpture, any of those people that have made an impact on society while they were alive or still alive were a disciple of one of these masters, whether they realized it or not, carrying out a tiny bit of the plan of one of these masters. And so the masters, once they left the public eye, they knew at some point they would have to come back and teach humanity directly. They just didn't know when. So up until about a little over maybe 75 years ago, 80 years ago, 75. My math is always bad when it comes to dates. it was expected that the masters would have to wait another 1,300 years before they could come back into the everyday world and teach humanity. Now, what happened was they were training, Maitreya was training 4 disciples to take on the role of world teacher, the same role that Jesus did 2,000 years ago, that Gautama Buddha did before him. Other teachers like Rama, Mithra, Zoroaster, Hercules, Moses, they were all world teachers for their time and were trained by a master to teach humanity at their time. Well, there was 4 disciples that were being trained for this role for this upcoming age of Aquarius, and the only one that took the role was Krishnamurti. So Krishnamurti was being groomed to be the world teacher for this time.
Correct. That was like the early 1900s, correct?
Correct. And then
He's in India.
Correct. And in England and so forth. Anyway,
yeah.
And you can see his videos online. He's quite an extraordinary teacher. But anyway, Maitreya realized that he would have to come back himself along with his masters, that Krishnamurti would not be able to do the job because of 2 things. One, humanity made tremendous advancements during the time of World War I and World War II, technologically, and also the way that we saw ourselves in the world and what we learned about the world. From that time period, it was just this tremendous evolutionary leap for humanity.
Okay.
And then the other thing is we developed the atomic bomb. And these masters saw that we could destroy ourselves. And there was 2 times where we almost did destroy ourselves. One was with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the other one was with the creation of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
Both those things created enough tension where we could have destroyed ourselves had it not been for the effort of the hierarchy and the disciples and both sides of Russia and the United States. So Maitreya knew that he would have to come back. And so he told Krishnamurti that he would no longer be needed to be the world teacher.
Okay.
And so, but Maitreya said that there's 3 conditions that we would have to do as a humanity to prove to him that we were ready for these masters to come back. The first was a measure of peace had to have been established. Now, it didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be all-encompassing or involve every nation, but there had to be a measure of peace. And then the second was the principle of sharing had to start to govern the minds of the world leaders at that time. And this is in 1945.
Okay.
When he saw that he would have to come back. And then the third thing, which I always jokingly say, but I really do mean it, is the third thing that I still don't see it to this day, but the political parties around the world had to start cleaning up some of the corruption.
Yeah.
Those 3 things had to happen in order to signal to Maitreya that we're ready. Like I said, it didn't have to be perfect, but we had to kind of be moving in that direction. And I talk about the Marshall Plan all the time as a historical evidence of the principle of sharing, bringing about peace. And had George C. Marshall and his group not come up with that, Maitreya might not have been able to come back. So that signaled to Maitreya that the world leaders were starting to think about the principle of sharing, was the Marshall Plan. And it also did bring about a measure of peace amongst those nations who typically were quite violent toward one another.
That's what I was going to ask, was the peace between specific nations?
Yeah, so the nations that participated in the Marshall Plan, like the United States, England, Germany, France, Italy, all those nations that were at war with one another all the time. And since then, not one of those nations have attacked another nation that participated in the Marshall Plan. Now, we've attacked other nations, but we have not attacked any of those nations that participated in the Marshall Plan. Now, have we? The United States and those nations trust each other better than they trust any other nations on the planet. And the peoples of those nations it's freer for them to travel to those other nations than it is to travel to any other nations on the planet. So it's easier for us to go to England. I mean, that's about as easy as going to New York. You know what I'm saying? It just takes a flight, right? But if you want to go to North Korea, you got to go through a bunch of diplomatic hoops to get there, right? Because we don't trust them in that way. Had the United Nations brought about the principle of sharing then, or the United States kept the Marshall Plan going and tried it with other nations other than just the European nations, we'd be living in a totally different world than we are today. I mean, so... you're a religious guy. You follow the Bible. Jesus said a tree is known by its fruit, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a truth. It's a spiritual truth, right? But you look at what Maitreya says, without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. Well, if you look at the Marshall Plan, the seed of the Marshall Plan that was planted a tree, and the fruit of that tree is goodwill, which is the lowest aspect of love from the master's point of view. It created love amongst nations from the lowest aspect, right? Not the highest aspect, but from the lowest aspect.
Okay.
Then you look at the Pax Americana policy of, let's say, the Pentagon over the last 75, 80 years, which always has been promising peace, security, and those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
It has not. So the seeds of that Pax Americana policy of attacking another nation, threatening this nation, putting sanctions on that nation, have done nothing but destabilize peace, bring about instability between nations, distrust, resentment amongst nations, and so forth, violence at some point,
You can get
terrorism.
deep into conspiracy with the Pentagon too. So,
yeah, but you know what I mean. And so when Maitreya saw that we were trying the principle of sharing, I mean, that signaled to him that they could come back. Now,
and that was through, you're saying, so that was through the martial law. He saw that.
Not martial law, Marshall Plan.
Marshall Plan. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Two totally different things.
I was watching the South Korea and North Korea stuff going on.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's crazy.
But so Maitreya saw that at some point he would have to come back, and in sometime in 1952, Ben was approached by his master, and then eventually was approached by Maitreya to play a role
on a bridge in London, correct?
Yeah. Now this was actually in a vision that Benjamin Krim had of Maitreya, but Maitreya.
And then so afterwards was the bridge that we talked about last interview.
That was probably before this event.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ben said he was working with his master, and his master said, "Okay, turn the tape recorder off." He goes, "Maitreya has something he wants to tell you." And then he saw Maitreya enter his room in a kind of a spiritual light kind of deal. So Maitreya wasn't really there physically, I don't think. He just saw him. And
maybe like astral projection or something.
I guess. Well, I mean, they don't astrally. Yeah. So, but Maitreya asked Ben to have if he would be willing to play a role in his coming, and he said that it would be about 20 years. Far sooner than anybody expected. In fact, it was actually, I think he said 17 years from that point.
So the 17th years when he talked to him on the bridge, his master on the bridge.
No, these are two totally different events. So
I thought you meant 17 years later would be when he met him on the bridge.
Yeah, it wasn't his master on a bridge. Okay, so that story. Well, let's clear up that story.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Ben was walking down the street, and a gentleman approached him and said, "You're receiving messages from a master, but they're bouncing off. You're being sent messages from a particular master, but they're bouncing off of you."
Okay.
And Ben said, "No, there's no way. I'm not evolved enough to receive messages like that." And he goes, "No, you're very much being sent these messages." He said, "These messages, and your master told me to tell you to do such and such. And if you do such and such," and he was never allowed to say what that such and such was, that these messages would start to come through. And he did it. And then he was taking a shower one day. He got out of the shower, and he heard this voice in his head that was louder than his own thoughts. And the words were, "Go to a certain bridge at a certain time."
Yeah.
And that's where he met the guy who it wasn't his master. It was just somebody who was connected to the masters.
Okay.
His master was always in the Himalayas.
Okay.
And that's when his training started. And at some point during his training is when Maitreya offered him the opportunity to have a role in his coming.
Yeah, so I'm also okay. So that's why I was trying to figure out, when did he hear him say that basically you're going to help me or whatever you said.
Well, he didn't say you're going to. He asked.
Not help.
But these masters always ask you, would you be willing to help? Correct. And so when Maitreya made the announcement through Alice Bailey that he was coming back far sooner than anybody expected, but humanity had to do these three things, that was in 1945. And then about 7 or 10 years later, whenever it was, is when he asked Ben to help him. And he and Maitreya apparently asked 5 people.
Okay.
One in New York, Ben in London, one in Geneva, one in Darjeeling, and one in Tokyo.
Okay.
And he went through all 5 of them. And the reason why there are these 5 and these 5 different cities is because those are the 5 planetary centers, like a chakra.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
one in New York, he said, did not believe Maitreya. He took on the role in London. The one in Geneva didn't believe it. Whatever this means, he said the one in Darjeeling is still asleep. I don't know what that means. And then the 5th one was in Tokyo, was a woman who believed she was Maitreya
Okay.
and had quite a following of people, but she believes she's Maitreya. I don't know if she's still alive or not, but she believes she's Maitreya.
Yeah,
So
there's a
Ben was,
few channels online that say they're Maitreya.
yeah, exactly. So there was a those 5. Okay, so then they were asked to do it, and Ben was the only one to take it up. So anyway, so then in 1975, the master, one of the masters, I don't know who it was, but one of the masters was the first master to go into a city. All the other ones were still in remote areas. So the first one went into New York,
Okay.
and Ben always said it was never the New York is not the most important center. It just happened to be the first one to go in. But the first one went into New York, and he said this is the order in which they came in. The first one went into New York. The second one went into London, apart from Maitreya. So there's another master in London,
Okay.
other than Maitreya. One went into Darjeeling, or one went into Geneva, one went into Darjeeling, and one went into Tokyo. And
So
then
what did he say? What was the most important center? Which one was?
there is no most important center. It's like
Okay.
they're all, you know,
Equal.
he was just saying that it wasn't because of the importance that one went in first. It was just that
Oh,
was the
okay.
one that went in first.
I got you.
So those 5 masters went into those 5 different cities, and then 2 other ones came right after that. He said one was always kind of around Moscow, but then became more active, and then the other one was in Rome. And the one in Rome is the Master Jesus. So Master Jesus for centuries had been living in the desert areas of the Middle East, and then entered Rome, because his role in the future will be to head up the churches. He'll be asked by the churches, hey, can you like tell us some of the things of the Bible and those kind of things? So that master is the master who was Jesus is in Rome. And then after that, now there's 14 masters in different cities around the world. So the ones that I know of, because this is the ones that Ben talked about, one is in London, or one is in New York, one is in London, one is in Geneva, Rome, Moscow, Darjeeling, and Tokyo. But then there's also one in Paris, one in Beijing, one in San Francisco, and then there's a master in
San
L.
Fran?
Huh?
I thought there was one in San Fran. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one on the outskirts of San Francisco and one in L.A.
Okay. So, quick question.
Mhm.
So, does he believe that? Because he doesn't he say he is the Christ? So, do they say Christ and Jesus is something completely separate? Then
Well, what is
doesn't he
okay?
say he is the
So
Christ?
this is where Maitreya would say that name brings nothing but confusion because of what we've been taught all our lives, right? That the Christ means the anointed one, the one, the Son of God,
Yeah.
above everything else. When in actuality, there is no Son of God in that way. We're all sons of God. And I wanted to read something about an article that Ben's master wrote that might clarify Maitreya and who Maitreya is, okay,
Yeah.
in a
Go
way
for it.
that, huh?
I said, go for it.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say was when I referred to him as the Christ, when Ben talked to him about is the Christ, is not that he is God or above Jesus in that way. He is the Christ according to the ageless wisdom teaching is a path that a master, not all the masters, but a path that a master can take, where they literally embody the love nature of God. So Maitreya is it's unbelievably rare to be a Christ anywhere throughout cosmos. They're not found all over the place on every street corner and planets, so they're very rare, and they're even more rare in our solar system because our solar system is not very as advanced. But to have 2 of them on a planet like Earth, which is not one of the more evolved planets in our solar system, is like almost unheard of, because we had
Okay.
the Buddha, who embodies the wisdom aspect
Yeah,
of
that's what I was gonna
God.
say. Didn't he say he's Krishna, Buddha, Christ, all of them?
No, Krishna was a disciple of Maitreya, just as Jesus was a disciple. But the
Okay.
Gautama Buddha became the Buddha when the master who is the Buddha, who was working in the hierarchy, overshadowed him in the same way that Maitreya overshadowed Jesus. So the process of overshadowing started with Jesus when he was 13 and became full and complete at the baptism. And then from the baptism to the crucifixion is when he was known as Jesus Christ. But it was the Christ aspect working through Jesus in that way from the esoteric teachings. I know most Christians would say this is blasphemy, but
Yeah,
this
that's
is
what, yeah,
this,
for sure.
you know, this is the that's the ageless wisdom view of who and what the Christ is. But the Buddha worked through Gautama Buddha in the exact same way. And so these masters, that's one of the ways that they got their teaching out into the world was through overshadowing of a disciple.
Can you explain overshadowing real quick? Because I
Sure.
had
And
seen a video where, I don't know if
what
you saw it, someone supposedly snuck a camera into one of Krim's meditations,
well
and you
well
could
the
hear
funny
someone
thing,
talking, but his mouth wasn't moving.
yeah, that was a recording.
That's what I thought. That's what I
Yeah, it
thought.
was. Yeah, there was I can't remember how many. There was like 100 or so uh, throughout from like 1977 to 82, where
Okay.
Ben was overshadowed by Maitreya and gave out messages. And the recording that they took that they thought was this demonic presence because he wasn't speaking was
Yeah.
Ben being overshadowed by Maitreya as they played a recorded video or recorded audio of
Oh,
him when
okay.
he was overshadowed by Maitreya. Because every time not every time when Ben was overshadowed by Maitreya did Maitreya give a message through him. So
Okay.
the times that I saw him when he was overshadowed, he never gave a message to the audience. It was just Ben
Okay.
was overshadowed by Maitreya. He gave a blessing to the crowd, but we played a
Hey. Okay.
recording of him, and that's what
That's
that
what I
was.
thought, because you could
Mhm.
hear it. It sounded like that to me. I was like, it sounds like they have like a recording somewhere.
Yeah.
That's
Again,
exactly what it sounded like.
paranoia comes in and people, oh my god, right? And
Yeah.
his voice when he was overshadowed by Maitreya is different than when he's overshadowed by his master. Maitreya actually controlled the intonation of his voice, and so it sounds very strict and stern the way he talks when he's overshadowed like that. When
Okay.
he was
So
talking,
basically, he overtakes him. Basically, his overshadow overtakes him, and then
yeah,
just
well,
talks through him.
okay, so overshadowing is a concept that I only know from what I've read. Okay. I
Okay.
can't, but it's a form of telepathy. And there are different stages of overshadowing. So Ben's
Okay.
overshadowing with his master may be different than when Mozart was overshadowed by his master to write all those pieces that he wrote, or the time that Rembrandt, one thing I didn't say, when the masters thought they were going to come back, uh, one of the things that Rembrandt did is he painted 80 or so self portraits of himself. Well, Rembrandt was a very advanced disciple and knew about the
Okay.
masters, worked with the masters. And according to Ben's own master, Maitreya used to overshadow him when he would do his self portraits and literally painted Maitreya's eyes into every one of Rembrandt's paintings as a
Okay.
kind of oblique way of letting people know who Maitreya is through art, which I thought was quite astounding, quite
Yeah.
extraordinary.
That's
But
crazy. I never heard that before.
so overshadowing from a master could be with a disciple that they're not really that close to, but is evolved enough to be able to be overshadowed. And then they give a teaching or a blessing through that disciple. Now, Ben, he had been trained for some years by his master to have a very, very close relationship to where he could get a question into his master instantly and an answer back like instantly. So when Ben would sit down and give a talk or a radio interview
He could
or
like
even,
telepathically talk and have an instant answer.
yeah, he said sometimes it was his master talking through him, other times it was Ben talking, sometimes the both of them would kind of talk, in a conversation kind of deal. But Ben said even just a look that he would give his master, if he so choose, it would be a look from his master. Or
Okay.
if he touched you or shook your hand, sometimes his master could feel that touch too. Now, not every disciple has that kind of close relationship with a master. So did Rembrandt have that kind of relationship with his master when he was overshadowed painting in that way? I don't know. But so
Also, I was going to ask, so were a lot of people that did stuff like that overshadowed, like Da Vinci and?
Well, Da Vinci was nearly a master himself. He was
Okay.
very, 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 very close. I'm sure he could have been or was.
So there's
But
probably a good percentage of the people back then that came up with like a lot of that type of top stuff were probably more likely overshadowed.
yeah, like according to Ben's master, Muhammad was overshadowed by Jesus in the exact same way that Jesus was overshadowed by Maitreya. And the teachings of the Quran are actually the teachings of Jesus. We don't see it that way. Christians don't see it that way. Muslims sure as heck don't see it that way. That's why these political ideologies create such divisions where
Oh
there
yeah.
really is no
I mean the
division in the
yeah.
teachings.
The
And
Quran
so
basically says Jesus is God, but they'll never admit it.
yeah, and so but and it also talks about the fact that you don't have to believe something in order to know God. In that same way, you don't have to have a certain belief in something as long as you're a good person and you do good and you try to do good and try to help people. That is enough. It's actually in the Quran. You know what I mean? So, but very much the way that it reads a lot of times the way that the Bible read, in a lot of ways. But anyway, but yeah, so some of these disciples are overshadowed by masters, some of them aren't.
Okay.
Some of them maybe have a mental inspirational idea that was planted there by one of the masters
Okay.
but it's not an overshadowing. So not all disciples can be overshadowed. Not all
Okay.
disciples are evolved enough to be overshadowed, but none of the disciples that are really advanced enough to be overshadowed but are channeling a master. So when you to talk about the ascended masters and those people that worship and pray to these ascended masters and receive all sorts of channeled information, that's all coming from the astral planes, which
Okay.
is riddled with illusion. And it's so funny. I just tried to answer a question on my last video that a guy put about, I said something about Maitreya saying the hearts of humanity are sound. He goes, well, Jeremiah such and such says the heart shouldn't be trusted and this, that, and the other. Well, he was talking about the emotional nature of all of us, the astral nature, which shouldn't be trusted because it's riddled with illusion. So
Okay.
when these people are channeling these so-called masters, they're not channeling any master, getting any information from a master. They're just receiving information from the astral planes, which
Okay.
is nothing but illusion. Does that make
So have
sense?
you ever heard of like how musicians will say they have altars? Is that the same thing basically?
It would depend on the musician. I
Okay,
mean,
'cause I've heard musicians say they have altars that they basically come in and help them perform and stuff like that. I was just wondering if that was like the same thing.
I, I have no idea.
Okay, and I have a
But
question from
sure.
a viewer too. When you're done,
No, go ahead.
okay.
Yeah,
He
this is.
says, according to your guest, how did life start on this planet? Excellent talk, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I. How did life start on this planet? I think is probably how most anthropologists assume that it started on us. We came out of the animal kingdom, and so the early origins of life on this planet um, probably started just the way that most anthropologists would say that it did. With a protein strain and this, that, and the other. But where we come into play is the animal kingdom. Out of every kingdom comes out of the kingdom below it. Okay, so the plants come out of the mineral kingdom, animals come out of the plant kingdom, we come out of the animal kingdom. These masters of wisdom, which is the kingdom above us, come out of the human kingdom. And we started to incarnate as individuals. We individualized, which is another way of saying we became human, 18 and a half million years ago out of the animal kingdom, symbolized in the Bible with, of course, Adam and Eve, having nothing really to do with a naked man and woman in the Garden of Eve, the way that most people believe life to be created in that way. But it's just a symbol. Now,
So are you saying through like evolution, basically?
yeah, through evolution. But
Okay.
here's the thing, though. Evolutionists and the creationists both have gotten it right and both have gotten it wrong. So a creationist thinks that life started when, in Adam, in the Garden of Eden,
Garden of
right?
Eden,
Just kind
yeah.
of came out of nowhere. But they also talk about something creating that life, right? That's the truth of which they got right. Okay. So not everything that I don't need to bash Christians as much as I do, but because they're so dogmatic about things, that's what I try to shed some light on it. But they got some things right. You know what I mean? And yes, life was created by a higher intelligence. Where I think that perhaps the atheist or scientist gets it wrong is life didn't just haphazardly create. There's an intelligence and an order to it,
Yeah.
but it's a slower process than the evangelical Christian would think. You know what I mean? So it didn't just take 7 calendar days. It took billions of years for us to get to the point where we could incarnate as individual humans right out of the animal kingdom. It's taken us millions of years to get to where we are today, and we have millions of years to go to where we end life on this planet, where we go off to another solar system, but not in a life destroying kind of way, but where we go off to another planet as a group of humanity to another part of the cosmos and live life on a higher realm. You know what I mean? But it's
Okay.
just, it's all a part of the process, but it's a slow process. Now looking at the different kingdoms, James, in between each kingdom, there's a transitional period. So the minerals that are radioactive are the highest of the evolved of all the elements in that kingdom, and they're moving eventually into the plant kingdom. And then as a plant evolves over billions of years, the highest evolved of all plants are the ones that create an aroma or color, like a flower or something to that effect. Those are
Okay.
the highest evolved of all the plants. And then if you look at the animal kingdom, it's very easy to see which ones are the most evolved of all the animals. The domesticated animals are the most evolved of all the animals. So my dog or your cat, if you have a horse, that can respond to human thought, well, they're more evolved than a shark. Sharks don't respond to human thought. You can't intellectualize with a shark. They're just going to eat you, right? But you can train a dog. You can train a dog to respond to your thought. My dog responds to my thought all the time
Oh yeah,
because
dogs are so
yeah.
smart.
So, but they are the most evolved of all the animals, and will eventually start to incarnate millions of years from now into the into the human kingdom.
Yeah.
And then the highest of all the humans are then are those people that start to create spiritual light, the disciples of the world. So Leonardo da Vinci, Jesus, is clearly more evolved than the average of humanity. They're just head and shoulders above. Their perception, their creativity, their influence on humanity is far superior than an average person would be. But it doesn't mean that an average person won't eventually get to that point. Jesus himself said, "Greater things than this shall you do yourself," when he was talking about the miracles that he was performing, right? But it you can't relate the two. You know what I mean? So or you can relate the two, but they're just extreme. So you look at somebody like Mozart, his level of musicianship and composing of music, Bach, Beethoven. You can't, you look at, I don't know, ZZ Top, you know what I mean? They're just, or I'm just trying to think of any rock group or pop group that has kind of come and gone. The level of musicianship of some and caliber of musicianship of somebody like a Mozart is far superior than the average musician that's just playing
Yeah, that's true.
chopsticks. You know what I mean? So you can't, but it doesn't mean that those people won't eventually get to that point. It's just that there's a difference between what they're manifesting and what they're not. So those disciples like Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Krishnamurti, Leonardo da Vinci, Jesus, Muhammad, Gandhi, I'm going through all the ones that I can think of, Martin Luther King, are just head and shoulders above the average of humanity. And the work that they put out, the writings that they put out, the speeches that they give, like Abraham Lincoln, the speeches that he gave had so much spiritual light in them. They still are inspirational even to this day. Same thing with some of the words in the Bible that Jesus spoke, that he might have spoke. He didn't write them down, but he might have spoke it. Somebody else wrote it down. Still have the truths to this day. Where you have the works of Beethoven or Mozart still challenging the greatest musicians of our day. They're still challenging their abilities. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah,
of who they are. I mean, it's just
I
you
see what
can't
you're saying.
compare the two. So I know people get turned off when it comes to talking about life as a hierarchy or evolution, but there is an evolution of consciousness. And so just because you're at where you're at today doesn't mean that tomorrow you won't be a little better, a little stronger, have a little bit more vision, little bit more love towards humanity than you have today, right?
Yeah.
You're not stuck in this point, right? Where people are so fatalistic and thinking that this is their life, That's it. There's no other point of life, right, where we really are evolving farther than we even can possibly imagine. Where where you are today, where you'll be a million years from now, are two totally different things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see
So,
what you're saying.
and like I said, Jesus said it himself, greater things than this shall you do yourself.
Yeah.
Totally missed by most people in the churches. They don't even talk about that. But it was a truth. It's a spiritual truth,
So when
So
you said a while ago about a higher intelligence, obviously as Christians we call him God or Yahweh. What did you mean by a higher intelligence? Do you mean like an actual?
I mean like God or Yahweh.
Okay,
Just,
that's what I was asking. Okay,
but the Maitreya talks about God in a couple different ways. Okay,
and
so
then
there's
if you could get into, sorry to cut you off, where does
yeah.
Maitreya fit into that? If there is a higher intelligence above him, where does he fit into that?
Well, so I kind of got distracted. I need to read what Ben's master wrote about who and what Maitreya is. Do you mind if I read it real quick and then we
Go ahead,
talk
go
about
for
God?
it. Go for it.
So this is an article that he wrote back in the mid 80s called The Son of God. It was a Son of Man. It was published in Share International.
Okay.
Okay, so he said many people await the return of the Christ with trepidation and fear. They sense that his appearance will promote great changes in all departments of life. His values, they rightly assume, will necessarily alter their ways of thinking and living, and they blanch at such a prospect. Besides, so mystical has been the view of the Christ presented down the centuries by the churches that many fear his judgment and omnipotent power. They await him as God come to punish the wicked and reward the faithful. It is sadly to be regretted that such a distorted vision of the Christ should so have permeated human consciousness. No such being exists. In order to understand the true nature of the Christ, it is necessary to see him as one among equal sons of God, each endowed with full divine potential, differing only in the degree of the manifestation of that divinity. That he has achieved the fullness of that divinity is his glory, and well may we stand in reverence at this achievement. That this same achievement is rare indeed is also indisputably true. But the wonder of the Christ for men is that he was one of them. Not there is in the trials and sufferings of men, but he did know it. Each step of the path that men still tread has he painfully trodden. Nothing there is in the whole panorama of human experience that he has not shared. Thus truly is he the Son of Man. There can be little doubt that were he to appear unannounced in our midst, few would recognize him. So far from the general notion is he that he would pass unnoticed in the crowd. Thus it is today among his brothers as he awaits man's invitation to begin his mission. Many who see him daily know him not. Others recognize him but are afraid to speak. Still others wait and pray, hopeful that he may be the one for whom they dare not hope. Only his declaration before the world will establish him in the sight and hearts of men. While we await that day of days, let us clarify in our minds the reason for his return. Let us understand the nature of the task which he has set himself. To establish in our midst the fact of God has he come. To recreate the divine mysteries is he here. To teach men how to love and love again is he among us. To establish man's brotherhood does he walk the earth once more. To keep faith with the Father and with man does he accept this burden. To usher in the new age has he returned. To consolidate the treasures of the past, to inspire the marvels of the future, to glorify God and man has he descended from his high mountain. Let us look at his priorities: the establishment of peace, the inauguration of the system of sharing, the removal of guilt and fear, the cleansing of the hearts and minds of men, the education of mankind in the laws of life and love, and introductory to the mysteries, the beautification of our cities, the removal of barriers to travel and interchange of peoples, the creation of a pool of knowledge accessible to all. That such a task is not an easy one, not even for the Son of Man, is clear. Ancient habits of division and separation have strong roots, while fear and superstition cast their spell over millions of mankind. But never before in the history of the world has a teacher come better equipped for his task. Maitreya has come to do battle with ignorance and fear, division and want. His weapons are spiritual understanding, knowledge, and love. His shining armor is truth itself. That's who Maitreya is.
That was Ben. You said that was Ben that wrote that?
Now it's Ben's master that wrote that.
His master, okay. Well, when was that written?
In the mid 80s in 1984.
Okay.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah.
And each one of his articles, when I read, you get a better understanding of who these masters are and how they are, right? But you also get a better understanding of who and what Maitreya is. So people have such a mystical view of him, right? They don't understand who and what he is. When people, say all sorts of nasty things about they've never heard Maitreya speak. They don't know they don't know what he stands for, really. They haven't taken the time to really study it. But
I think part of that is because nobody's ever physically seen him on like a video speaking or anything like that.
True.
So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Of course, yeah. So anyway, but getting back to who and what Maitreya says God is, well, God is conscious. It's consciousness. It's all the manifested universe, but it's also what's unmanifested. So there is a consciousness that's created all this, but there's also a unmanifested part of God that's allowing all this to exist that you can never get away from. If you went to the farthest corner of the universe, there's still this, whatever this space is, that allows something to exist. So if you look at a house, right, for instance, and you build a house in a space, right, a three-dimensional space, and then you destroy that house, what happened to the space that allowed that house to be there? Did anything happen to that space?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That space is the self. That's what he says, that we all share that part of life, that part of so there had to have been something. My mom, who is a staunch Christian, has even asked this question: what was there before God? You know what I'm saying? So if God created everything, what was here before God? Or, and you can almost have this mental glitch at a certain point,
yeah,
right?
It's been a debate for centuries.
Correct. But if you look at that space that allowed that house to exist, where does it end? Does it end at the end of the street? Does it end at the end of the town? And then there's a new space, or is it just keep going on and on and on forever? Carl Sagan, the astrophysicist, said it takes a universe for you to be able to put a cake in your oven and bake a cake.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can't. There's a small part of it, and there's a large part of it, and that part of it is that self. That's what Maitreya is here to teach humanity. That's who and what we really are. We're not these little lives that we identify with, all these different personas that we identify with. We are that which allows everything in the universe to exist. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, it doesn't matter. You can still realize God and the self in whatever moral or belief that you believe in. But you can't do it when you believe that you're the only one that's gotten it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So anyway, but does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
All right. So probably about a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably about a year ago. I heard you say you thought you might know who Maitreya is on TV. I know you won't answer and tell who the person is, so I'm not going to ask you that. But do you think that that's still the person? And is he still on internet or TV? And is it a Muslim man?
I don't know if did I say that?
Yeah, you said you had a suspicion on who it possibly could be.
I don't know if it was or not.
Okay.
But there was what I mainly talked about, and what I remember talking about is one of the ladies in the Share International group here in Atlanta was the group here in Atlanta was putting on an expo. They had like a little booth in an expo, and they had all their stuff set up with pictures of Maitreya in Nairobi, Kenya. And this woman came up and she goes, I've seen that man before on TV. And she goes, you have? And he goes, oh yeah, I've seen him. He doesn't look like that, he's not talking about these things, but I've seen him. I know that's him, right?
Okay.
And she said he was talking about politics. And then she
Okay.
said, but that's what she said. Now, the other thing that I said too was that one of the experiences that I had with Maitreya before Maitreya made his first announcement on TV is he did say that he goes, "You'll see me on TV real soon, and we're going to change the world together." That's what he told me. But
Okay.
I saw a guy on a YouTube channel, and I was like, "Is that him?" It was the only time I've ever had that suspicion.
Yeah, I think that's probably who you were speaking about. Because you're
But
like, I won't say the name, but you're like, I just had a suspicion. Sorry for the ambulance
oh,
noise
that's
in the
okay.
background.
But to be honest, I don't even know the person's name.
Oh,
I
okay.
never, I listened to the video, I watched it, but I never went back to it because
Okay.
Maitreya says, "Those who run after me, you've already lost me." So I'm
Okay.
not even going to go back and try to find him. I just, okay, just if it is him, it's him. I think personally, what's going to happen for most people that know this information on whatever level they know it, they are all of a sudden going to see he's going to say something that's going to trigger in them that could be Maitreya. They won't know for sure until the day of their declaration, but they'll be thinking it.
Okay.
And for most people, I am sure it will be somebody that they're familiar with, that they've
Yeah,
seen
that's
on
what I was
TV
thinking.
before and just
Seen
haven't
before.
even thought that was him. Now, these masters are very good, and Maitreya is very good at being able to give spiritual truths without you realizing that he's giving you a spiritual truth. I mean, he's a master at it, you know. And so he can say something. He could be talking about sports on the ESPN, right? I'm not
Okay.
saying that's what he's doing, but I'm just saying he could be talking about sports on ESPN and be talking about spiritual truths and the principle of sharing, and you're thinking he's talking about a soccer match.
Oh, okay.
You know, and so you wouldn't even think that, you know, so, you know, the times that I saw Maitreya with other people, a lot of times they didn't recognize him as Maitreya until after I told them.
Okay.
And they're
And
like, "Oh
what
my
was it?
gosh."
Ben said he started making appearances on TV and stuff around like
Uh,
2009,
he made the announcement in January 2010. Now
2010.
he did not say that it was that month.
Yeah, yeah. He just
So
said he had started
and then
making
everybody
appearances.
went looking for anything to try to find any interview with Maitreya, and
Yeah.
they came
And there,
across Raj
Raj
Patel.
Patel. Yeah.
And so
I mean, he some of the stuff he was saying made people think it was him because some of the not everything, but some of the stuff was similar, like on the food principles, and
yeah.
so
Now
I could see why people thought that at first.
true, and I had a very good friend of mine who we were talking about that, and I was like, "Do you think that was him?" Because I didn't at the time. I was like, "I don't know." And
Yeah,
she
I was
said,
50-50.
yeah, she said, "Gary," she goes, "I met Raj Patel 5 years ago at a dinner party in New York." She goes, that's not Maitreya." I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah,
She goes, "Oh yeah." So,
I remember hearing you
um,
say that.
yeah, so she, you know, and then when I started really listening to him, and Maitreya, when asked if he is Maitreya, will not say yes and he will not say no. He will find a
Yeah,
way to kind of skirt the issue. And Raj Patel said, "No, I'm not Maitreya. I don't know who he is."
I remember him saying that.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and I know Ben did not want to say anything. It was painful for him to have to go through and have to deal with this. But
Oh,
I don't
okay.
even think Ben was expecting that kind of um, interest in it.
Interested
You know,
people searching.
yeah, I mean, it was like, you know, it's so funny. I mean, you know, people talk about this with me all the time. They'll comment, "Well, you know, why isn't there any interest in this information about Maitreya and da 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 da?" Like you said, nobody's recognized him yet, right?
Yeah,
As soon as they recognize him, this is going to be like the dam burst, like whoop. I mean, imagine when it actually is Maitreya.
yeah. I
What
could
people
actually see that. I could see that happening for sure.
So, you know, that's where that is. And then when you look at really what's going on, I mean, for decades, Maitreya put off his interview, his first interview, because he was waiting on the stock market to crash, because he said that that's what would bring humanity to its senses. It'd
Yeah.
bring us to our knees, but it would also bring us to our senses, to where we'd actually listen to him. Well, Ben's master said in 2008, he was talking about the what we call the downturn in the economy. It was very, 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 very close to collapsing the way that Maitreya had predicted in 2008. But Ben's master said, he goes, if it's allowed to collapse, that would be the end of it. And it wouldn't be quite as painful as everybody's thinking. Now, he goes, the other thing that's going to happen is that the forces of darkness are going to really prop it up, and it's going to go to even the stock markets are going to go to even higher highs, which is exactly what happened. Ben's master then made another prediction saying if it does do it like plan B, where it goes up to even higher highs, when it finally does crash, it's going to be a lot worse than it would have been had we just let it collapse in 2008. So I think we're living in this fog of.
Oh, you can definitely see the economy is right on the verge of
Oh yeah,
possibly collapsing right now. You can see it.
yeah, but but really the people, it's like we're all living in this kind of fog,
Yeah.
or it's really weird. It's like we're stumbling around in something. Like I've literally been standing still in a store and somebody almost walked right into me. It's like I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
even there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like people are so out of touch with what's going on in the world, right?
Oh
That
yeah.
I think that might be one of the reasons. It's got to be the reason why most people haven't recognized Maitreya. Maitreya might not even be speaking on TV the way he was a few years back. He might have stopped all that for now. I don't know. I have no idea. You
Yeah, I
know,
had seen this one guy. He has a channel. He talks about him every once in a while. He was saying Elon Musk was a good candidate, and I was just like, I don't think so. He doesn't really talk
no.
about. I mean, he talks about some of the stuff, but not what you would think.
Well, the way I would say you would recognize Maitreya, okay, if I had to guess, okay, and this is just a guess, you look for a simple man, someone
Yeah,
who's very simple, right? Who perhaps doesn't have a lot of flair in what they're saying,
yeah,
doesn't put a lot of attention on themselves. In fact, doesn't talk about himself at all. It's always talking about other people, right? But one of the most extraordinary experiences that I think really could kind of give you an indication of how Maitreya really is was written up in a tabloid magazine that Ben confirmed was Maitreya. It was in the Sun Times, I think.
okay,
And there was a person. This was years and years ago, but this might give you an indication of how Maitreya really is, right? And I have a hard time saying this without crying because it really moves me that much. But there was a gentleman who had cancer that lost everything, lost his family, lost his law practice, everything. It was living on the street.
okay,
And Maitreya came to him and saw him and, talked to him about something. I don't know exactly what they said, was about to walk away. And that man said, please don't leave me. And he reaches into a dumpster and grabs old, moldy, dirty bread and breaks it and breaks the bread with this man. That doesn't sound like Elon Musk.
yeah,
You know what I
no,
mean?
not at all. I
It's
like
a,
laughed when I heard him say Musk. I was like, I don't
yeah,
think
I
so.
mean, and people are going to guess and they're going to keep guessing. And just as Maitreya says, if you run after him, you're going to lose him. These are people trying to run after. When people saw Raj Batal and went chasing after Raj Batal, they had already lost Maitreya. That's why I know myself and everybody in the Share International group that I knew of did not do that, did not start digging, trying to find a bunch of interviews with. I didn't know
Yeah,
anybody that was close to me in Share International that did that. Ben never said that, go check this channel out. That's Maitreya. See, I told you I
yeah,
was. He never said anything like that, right? It was just Maitreya had given an interview, not claiming to be him. The only thing that he said was that he used a common Middle Eastern name, like something to the akin of John Smith,
John
but
Smith. Yeah.
Middle Eastern.
So
Now,
you think he'll be Middle Eastern?
oh yeah, I mean,
Okay,
because
that's what I thought
I
too.
mean, but he had been living in the Asian community of London since 1977.
70, like the Brick Lane or something.
Correct. And so he had been living amongst, he would stay he doesn't have to sleep. He doesn't have to eat. He can sit down if he wants, but he doesn't have to sit down. But
Okay,
he was living and staying in different churches, mosques, synagogues, temples in the Asian community of London. So he would go from temple to temple, whether it was a
okay,
Hindu temple or a mosque or a church or whatever. Yeah, because he's really for all religions. He'll never confirm a religion as being the truest sense of what the religion is. There's truths in all the religions. And the thing that he says, because people in the Asian community of London, according to Ben, had started to suspect that he might be the Imam Mahdi. And
okay.
then they
Yeah,
would
I've heard
say,
that before.
yeah, and then some of them would say, oh, he can't be the Imam Mahdi because the Imam Mahdi is going to come into Damascus, and we're clearly not in Damascus. And then some people, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they
And then,
say he'll walk out of the box there in Mecca.
yeah, and then other people would say, no, he is the Imam Mahdi, right? Well, somebody asked him, are you the Imam Mahdi? And he goes, well, if I'm the Mahdi for the Muslims, what about the Christ for the Christians? Or the Messiah for the Jews? What about them? So he doesn't say yes, he doesn't say no. And then he said that these are just names that you guys came up with, that people came up with, that create confusion. He goes, I'm just a teacher. That's all he wants to be looked at, as a teacher. But a teacher in the broadest sense. He's a teacher for the whole world. He'll be teaching us about the laws of life, but he'll also be teaching us how to build the structures that support those laws and those kind of things. A teacher that we can't even possibly imagine what that kind of teacher he is, because we've never had an example of it ever, other than the writings of Jesus and the writings of the Buddha. But those are just writings. We don't know them. You know what I mean? Imagine being in the presence of Jesus. I mean, it'd be quite extraordinary, right? Or the presence of the Buddha, if you're a Buddhist, right? Be the same kind of experience, I'm sure. But somebody of living in modern times, having
I see what you're saying.
and
The Project Buddha statue, is that tied to Maitreya? Where they're making like the 500-foot Buddha statue?
These are just things that we are doing amongst ourselves.
Okay.
The only thing that is tied to Maitreya are the people who are working for justice, who are marching for peace. These are things that are tied to Maitreya's teachings. Maitreya and these masters, some of the masters, not all of them, but especially Maitreya and the Master Jesus, could be found in nearly every group of people marching for peace around the world, whether it's in Russia, Iran, here in the States, or whatever, right? They're almost always there somewhere in the crowd. They're not leading the crowd. They're not speaking to the crowd. They're not standing up on a platform yelling out whatever. They are just among the people. And I'm sure talking to people in the crowd and those kind of things. But those things are tied to Maitreya. Anything that you see in the news or online about this, that, and the other.
I was just curious because I've heard about it for years now, and they're calling it the Maitreya Buddha statue. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, a statue is just a statue. It means nothing at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And a name is just a name, and it means nothing at the end of the day. He's here for the whole world, and he's here to teach us how to live. He's here to teach us how to live together in peace through the principle of sharing. But that's about it.
You mentioned the Day of Declaration earlier. I know what it is, but can you go over it briefly from a viewer?
So according to Ben's master, there will eventually be a time when Maitreya will lift his head above the horizon, as he put it, and people will start to see that could be him. That I bet you that's Maitreya. And Ben always said to not ask him. So I'm sure people will ask me because I put myself out there with this. They'll write me or comment, oh, I know I saw him, and I'll have to delete the comment because I'm not allowed to say who he is, right? If I see him on TV, I'm not allowed to tell you. Why am I not allowed to tell you? Is because it's for each and every one of us to want for the world what Maitreya is advocating. That's why he's not using his name. Okay. So Maitreya wants you to listen to him in simple honesty, not look to him as a spiritual teacher or avatar or the Christ or the one awaited by all the world's religions or some kind of master or anything. He just wants you to listen to what he has to say and either say, I agree with that or I don't, and have the freedom to be able to do either. Okay. Yeah. So if I or anybody else said, oh, that guy's Maitreya, well, then guess what? You're going to start listening to him. Even if you don't agree with him, you're going to listen to him as Maitreya, right? Yeah, okay. And every time that I've recognized him in my own life, I had to recognize him. I had to use some kind of spiritual intuition to recognize that is Maitreya, because he didn't look like Maitreya. He might not have talked like Maitreya, but I had to recognize him. I had to have that recognition in my heart. And in doing that, there is a tremendous spiritual awakening. It's hard to explain, but if somebody had told me that was Maitreya and I missed it, I would have missed out on that opportunity, that experience of recognizing him for who he is. So I'm not allowed to say, anybody that knows who he is, if you recognize him on TV, don't ring me up and say, was that him? I'm not going to tell you. The only thing that Ben said is you just tell him, what do you think? Okay. So is it Elon Musk? What do you think? You know what I mean? If it's probably that's who you think it is, that's, that kind of thing. So the
Day of Declaration, is it true he'll talk to everyone in their own language, like telepathically?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So what's going to happen, the way that I see it, is he will be a well-known figure at that point. He's not going to still be unknown and then just thrown into the middle of the spotlight. So he'll start to awaken the hearts of humanity. People will start to respond to what he's saying. They'll start to trust what he's saying, perhaps see some of the impact of what he's saying and those kind of things. But the principle of sharing might not be in full swing, but there will be a tremendous interest in what he's saying about the principle of sharing, about the need for justice, about the need for peace. And the peoples, according to Maitreya, Ben's master, will demand from our news media him an opportunity to speak to us at one time. So the media is not going to just put him up there. We're going to be ringing up NBC, ABC, Fox, CNN. We want to hear what he has to say. Allow him to speak. He'll give a press conference. He'll have all the news media there. In fact, according to the masters, the satellites, the communication satellites, are in place for this one event. That's why they were put there.
Do you think that would be Starlink, maybe?
Well, they were already, I mean, I'm talking about the communication satellites that have already been there for decades, right? So, because this could have happened at any moment past 1982. So this is, Elon Musk was just a teenager at that point.
Yeah.
But anywho, he will then step up to the podium, and when we would think that he was about to speak, he won't open his mouth, but we will hear him inwardly in our own head, in our own language. So if you're
at that point say he's Maitreya,
yeah, but so like for instance, if you're French, you'll hear what he's saying in French.
Yeah.
If you're English, you'll hear it in English. If you're from the southern part of the United States, you'll hear it in American.
Yeah.
If you're Japanese and Japanese, Russian and Russian, and we'll all hear it in our own language. But everybody over the age of 14. If you're under the age of 14, unfortunately, you won't hear what he has to say in this way. But
why is that?
Apparently, they're not. Their chakras aren't developed enough to withstand the overshadowing of Maitreya, even as he's overshadowing. So it's a safety issue. So they won't be able to listen to him in that way. But they can still experience the energy. But Maitreya says you will hear what he has to say inwardly in our own head, in our own language, as we're watching TV, or even if we're not watching TV or a tablet or a phone, we'll hear it anyway.
So what if you're just out like in the middle of a field or the forest?
You'll hear it too.
Okay, you just won't see him. You'll just hear.
You won't see him. Yeah, and he will talk for maybe a few minutes, 20 minutes or so. I can what Ben said, and he will explain couple things that he'll explain that I can tell you. He will show us where we came from, this very high spiritual level that we were once at as a humanity, and how low we've fallen into this material morass of whatever we're in, to where we literally could destroy ourselves at any moment. That possibility is there at any moment. If we don't try the principle of sharing, at any moment we could destroy ourselves. It's a possibility. So it's not a likely possibility, but it is a possibility that we could destroy ourselves militarily.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or not fixing the environment is another one. So we will see, according to Maitreya, he will give humanity two visions along with this. One of what life will be like if we do not change. And we will all experience what it's like to lose our only planetary home and lose everything and die and feel the pain and the suffering of that at that time. And then we will also be allowed to see a vision of what will happen if we do try the principle of sharing, how extraordinary that will be. We'll have a glimpse of the future of what awaits humanity if we just do that. And then humanity will have to make a choice. What do we do? Do we continue on the ways that we're doing and end life on this planet? Because we will eventually do that. If that will eventually happen if we continue on this way. Or will we try the principle of sharing? And then at some point in there, he will say he is Maitreya, the one awaited, and then he was looked to as the Christ or this, that, and the other. He won't ever really say he's those things. He'll just say he's looked to as those things. But and then Maitreya himself said it will be as if he embraces all of humanity. We'll feel his love even physically. And then there will be millions of people all around the world that will be miraculously cured. And as Ben said at the end of every one of his lectures, and those three ways, and only those three ways, will you know that man, and only that man, is Maitreya.
Okay.
So up until that point, we won't know for sure. You could suspect it, you could guess it, but you won't know for sure.
So say if that day, if someone didn't want to listen to him, are they going to have a choice?
Yes, they can. He said they can tune it out.
Okay.
They can just do whatever you got to do mentally to, I mean, why anybody would want to do that, I don't know, but
Yeah, I was just
I'm sure the
curious.
people. And then after that, there will be quite a debate, according to what I understand. He will be creating, his love will do exactly what Jesus predicted in the Bible. It's already doing it now, but it will divide humanity to the point, up until the point of the Day of Declaration, where there will be those people who will be so strongly, firmly placed in the past and gripping as hard as they can to keep it from for any change happening, because they're so scared of what could happen, right? We're going to have a large segment of society doing that as he's giving these. This is before the Day of Declaration, and it's happening even now. We're seeing it even now. And then you're seeing the progressives wanting to see change, wanting to see the environment fixed, and wanting to see justice and those kind of things. They're going to be, their voice is starting to get heard even more, but it will even be more pronounced when Maitreya is out, known for who he is. And then there'll be a large group of people who won't know to do what to do with what. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so after the Day of Declaration, it's going to swing back so fast the other way that the divisions that we're used to seeing, that we think are only getting worse, which they are, which we think will be with us for all of eternity, will swing back the other way so fast that we can't possibly imagine how unified we will become as a people. In fact, the energy that Maitreya's that these divisions are being caused is within the law of cause and effect. It's the same energy. So it will come back in equal and opposite proportion quite quickly. And that's why the divisions are needed at this time, because everything has its equal and its opposite. And so eventually, right after the Day of Declaration, there will be a time, according to Ben's master, where we won't really do anything with his information. We'll just want that feeling to last. And we'll walk on eggshells for a while and tiptoe around for a little while. And then eventually we're going to realize that we have a planet to save. And that's when everything's going to kind of take off. Maitreya will then eventually introduce these masters one by one, starting with the Master Jesus, and then this master, the master you were talking about, Saint Germain, and those kind of things. Yeah. And then they will come out, and we will ask them, "Hey, can you help us with this? And what about this? And I got a question about that." And Jesus, what did you mean when you said this in the Bible? And he might say, "I never said that. That was put in there by you guys, right?" Or, "This is what I meant by that." So we'll have resources that we can't possibly imagine to today. These masters, I've been blessed enough to see Maitreya up until now, but I've also been blessed enough to have access to one of these masters through Ben when he was alive. And these masters have all the wisdom of the ages at their fingertips. They can answer any question that you have.
Talked to a master?
Me personally? Only through Ben. Only through Ben.
Okay.
So
you
or
asked
the
that
time,
question through Ben.
Yeah, or the times that I saw Maitreya, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're able to see a master and know who they are, right? Eventually, we will know who they are. Now, none of these. Now, the other thing too, I want to say here too to your listeners, you and your listeners, is not one of these masters are going to come out before Maitreya. So people always ask me, is this a master? Is this person? There's not one person that's going to come out that is truly a master until after the Day of Declaration. So
yeah, because I wrote a comment in this other video. He was saying he thought Trump was the Ascended Master. I thought you'd get a kick out of that one.
I find it scary, actually, that people put so much on him.
Yeah.
Right? So the one thing that I think is going on. Okay, so to kind of give you a history of where this is coming from is, I love these interviews because you ask such wonderful questions. They get me thinking about stuff, but hopefully I'm not going off on too much of a tangent.
No, like I said, I let you guys talk. I'll sit back for an hour and listen if I have to.
But when you were talking about Saint Germain, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, according to Alice Bailey, there was a controversy about who wrote Shakespeare. Was it Francis Bacon or was it Shakespeare? And there's been this controversy for a few hundred years. That controversy started when that particular master on the inner planes took over the governments of Europe and United States. What I mean by take over, but on the inner planes, was starting to work with the governments. When they did that, there's always something that happens. There's a reaction from humanity that happens that is kind of an unconscious knee-jerk reaction. And one of the things that happened was people started to think about and talk about Francis Bacon, who was a previous incarnation of this master. So
Okay.
Maitreya being in the world today is really what sparked this whole end times controversy that's been going on for the last 30 or 40 years, that people are convinced that the world is going to end, convinced that the Antichrist is going to come out, even though the Antichrist has already come and gone and has been and won't come back for another 3,000 years.
Yeah, because you believe it was Nero's spirit, right?
Well, it's an energy, and
Energy.
It was released through Nero at one point. It was also released through the Axis powers of Germany, Italy,
Germany,
and
Hitler. Yeah.
Japan. Right. So the Antichrist that people are looking for is not. There is no Antichrist in that way. So, but they're convinced that he's coming at some point. Right. Well, they're already picking up subconsciously that Maitreya is here. We're all connected on a way that we can't possibly imagine to this day. Right. So when these masters just take a step into the world, it affects us in a way that we don't understand yet. And so even the masters don't really know how it's going to change and affect humanity. So just by this one master taking on a new role on the inner planes, it created a controversy that in one of his previous lifetimes, he wrote Shakespeare, according to Alice Bailey. This is what she said, right? So I think what's going on with Trump is people are sensing that Maitreya is here. They don't articulate it that way. They don't know it that way, but they are thinking that there is a being that is divine, that has everybody's best interest, humanity's best interest at heart, that's going to bring about peace on this planet, and they're assigning it to Donald effing Trump.
Yeah, because
And,
that guy who I was talking about, he says that Trump's going to be the one who introduces Maitreya at Mar-a-Lago.
and it's fantasy, right? But I followed Donald Trump for years. I mean, I remember reading, I hate to say this, but don't tell my mother this, but I remember reading about him at Playboy magazine back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, and so, he's always been known as being this kind of New York shyster.
Flamboyant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, not saying that he couldn't have changed his ways and become a better person, but he doesn't seem like he's like that. And the other thing too is he's a fine example of the law of cause and effect. The first thing he did is he attacked the media, right? Called them fake news, called them, discredited them, insulted them, belittled them, demeaned them, and so forth.
Yeah.
And then he wants, at the same time, he wants them to love and respect him. It doesn't work like that. So
Yeah,
he's
that's a
not
good point.
he's not alone. Our world leaders are totally ignorant to the laws of life. That's why we have the problems that we have in society
Oh,
today.
yeah. Yeah, they don't care about us down here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, but they're also ignorant of the law of cause and effect.
Oh,
That
yeah.
if the United States attacks another country, they think they can do it and nothing's going to happen to us. But yet it intensifies storms over here. It causes earthquakes over here. All these negative
Yeah.
airplane failures, auto, crashes and so forth are all caused by our karma of attacking these other countries. They wouldn't be quite as, Hurricane Katrina would not have been as severe. Hurricane Helene would not have been quite as severe had we not done these other things in these other countries. They would have probably still happened because they're natural, causes to those storms, but
Yeah.
to
Oh,
the
yeah.
severity, to the destruction that they are happening, 9/11 is a direct result of our Pax Americana policy that we've had for decades. Terrorism in this country is a direct result of that. Conspiracy
Yeah.
theories and
I mean,
theorists are a direct result of our government lying to us all the time. How do
they say we trained Bin Laden under the name Tim Osman. So,
yeah, exactly. So,
yeah.
but everything that people talk about,
Yeah.
all the distrust, all the distrust toward the government, distrust toward our scientists, it's all because we found out that at some point they lied to us. I mean, to be honest,
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist myself. I don't go
I
down
mean,
those
I
rabbit
think
holes.
there's some stock in some of them, but
Yeah.
yeah, not all of them. There's definitely some of them that are probably have some truth in them for sure.
Yeah, and then somebody like Donald Trump comes out and says, "Hey, the media's been lying to you." Yeah, of course they've been lying to us, right? They're corporate driven. They're run off of profits. They're concerned about
Yeah.
their profit motive, But to the
Yeah. When I
extent that,
guess when one man owns most of the media, Murdoch, that could, I mean,
yeah,
you put out what
so
you want, I guess.
yeah, exactly. So but yet he wants them to love and respect him. It doesn't work like that. When when you are a critical person, and you're like, for instance, if I go into my job, right, start my day one, and I start telling everybody how they're losers and I'm better than them and I'm this, that, do you think they're going to send me Christmas cards?
No.
No, right? But if I go in there and I do exactly what Maitreya said for me to do, which is he put it like this. He goes, I never judge on anyone on whether they're good or bad. I only notice the good things that they do. So if I went into my new job and I didn't perhaps focus on the negative and I focused on a couple of good things that they're doing, well, I'm going to have a whole different experience than you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm the one that's at cause with that, that's creating that. And Donald Trump doesn't understand that he's at cause for all these things that he's doing, you know, and unfortunately he's a very powerful person with a very powerful voice, and we all have to deal with it.
And
But
who knows? He could know exactly what he's doing too.
well,
Never
I mean,
know.
uh, that's to be neither here nor there.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah, for sure. That'd be a whole
At
nother 2-hour conversation.
I know, right? But at the same time, my point is that what was my point? I guess my point was that none of these masters are going to come out before Maitreya comes out.
Yeah,
Donald Trump's not an
that
ascended
makes
master.
sense.
He's not going to introduce Maitreya. He's not, you know, this is all fantasy. But
Yeah.
whatever, you know,
Okay.
it is what it is. So
Got another viewer question.
yeah.
Stefan said, let me find it. He said, are Jesus and these masters divine? So I guess maybe what he's asking is, did someone create these masters, or and are they divine? Where did they come from?
They are us in potential. Every one of these masters went through, just like I read.
So they all started as basically normal human.
And they worked their way through everything. Now, not every master has to go through every experience that we all go through. Maitreya himself, according to Ben's master, went through every human existence and every human situation that we could go through or think about going through. He himself went through. So, for instance,
even like death.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he had lifetimes. Okay. Yeah, I mean
Okay.
But
so what, like reincarnated?
Yeah, reincarnation. Absolutely.
Okay.
So there are two great laws. So the two great laws that govern all of humanity. One's the law of cause and effect, and the other one's the law of rebirth. Okay. And so, but Maitreya went through everything that we could possibly imagine. So what's the worst thing that you could think of that could happen to somebody? I don't know, getting raped. He has raped somebody. He's also been raped. He has killed somebody. He's also been killed. He's been human trafficked and been a slave, and he's also been a slave owner. Every example throughout, I mean, not as Maitreya, but as a previous incarnation. Okay. And so he worked through all those things that we all have gone through at some point and became a master. Now, these masters are divine, but yet so are you. The listener, so am I. So is Donald Trump, who I very critical of, right? You know, we're all divine because there's nothing but divinity in the entire cosmos. Because just as I talked about the space that allows that house to exist, you know, where does it end, right? Where does divinity end? Is it where does it stop? It can't stop anywhere, right? So we see ourselves as separate. That's the problem, you know, and that's why Maitreya is here, is to teach us. He says he comes to rid the world of the crime of separation. He says he affirms that as his purpose. And so it causes all the ills of the world, all the problems of the world are all a result of our believing ourselves to be separate, which we're not. All the diseases and illnesses within humanity, individually and as a whole, are all caused by our belief that we are separate, which we are not. And our institutions and structures are in place to support that belief that we are separate. Capitalism is a classic example of this. It's all supported, and those people who are best at capitalism have the greatest sense of separate self, right? So it supports that, but yet it doesn't support the needs of all the people. The structures of the future will be supporting all the needs of the people. That's why Maitreya is going to start with the principle of sharing. It has to start with the principle of sharing, because by the principle of sharing, we'll bring about justice. People's needs will be met. We'll have food. We'll have clothing for everybody. Maybe not Armani suits, but we'll have something to clothe ourselves with, right? We'll have shelter in times of rain and cold. And, you know, we need a shelter. Everybody needs shelter of some kind. And then we need some kind of education and healthcare. And those are all rights that are human rights by people, for people, right? That will eventually be a divine, a divinely given right to each and every one of us by um, by these structures changing. Right now, they're only rights for a certain number of people, but not everybody.
Yeah.
And but that's where he and these masters will teach us how to build these structures to where they support the needs of all the people, not just the few. People think today that capitalism in the form that it is today can last forever, and it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
The divisions, economically. I don't know if you've ever been to a third world country where you've seen people who have literally nothing.
Oh yeah, I've been down all throughout Mexico. It's
Yeah, exactly. And the other experience that I had that I'm sure Maitreya put me into this situation when I was young was in Mexico. Actually, it's funny you said Mexico. I went to visit El Paso with my dad. He was working in
okay.
El Paso, and he and I went to the Rio Grande River. And my dad went one way, and I'll never forget this. This had the most profound impact on my life. I went to the edge of the Rio Grande, and the Rio Grande seemed very shallow at this point, maybe a foot and a half deep, and it
Okay.
might have been 30 or 40 feet wide, maybe. And I look, and there's this little shanty town on the other side of the Rio Grande River. And this young boy, a little younger than me at the time, comes out and goes down to the edge of the river and stands there. I don't wave at him. I don't smile. He never waved or smiled at me. We just looked at each other. And I remember looking at him, and I remember looking behind me and seeing the lights of the city of El Paso. And then I looked behind him, and there were no lights. They had no lights in this town, right? And
Wow.
he came out of a lean-to, right? It was just a lean-to. That was his shelter. And I remember thinking the only thing that's separating his life from my life is this little river, right?
Yeah.
So, it's all based on where you were born, right? Well,
Yeah.
and that one experience is what really led me to this information, to be honest with you, because there was something always gnawing at me about injustice, about the divisions economically between, but yet when you talk to a person who's totally sold on it, they think it's going to last forever. Everything's going to be fine. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. I mean, eventually somebody's going to say, if I can't have it, no one's going to have it.
Yeah. I
And
mean, there are multiple countries with nukes nowadays, so yeah,
correct.
it takes that
Exactly.
one person.
Just takes that one person. You're right. 100%.
Yeah.
And so that's the danger. That's why we have to really look at this. Now, I'm not expecting anybody that hears me talk on YouTube, James, to be the one that's going to change all of this. But
Yeah.
we're going to change it together. Just as Maitreya said, you're going to see him on TV really soon, and we're going to change the world together. We have to do it together. But
Yeah.
it's important for each and every one of us at this time. It's not so important that you see Maitreya on TV. What's more important is that you start to inquire, you start to think about injustice, sharing. Is this maybe something that we could do and try? If we try the principle of sharing and it doesn't work, let's go right back to what we're doing. Right? It's not going to hurt anything, right? So if when the time comes when Maitreya gives us that choice, do we try the principle of sharing and have a future, or not try it and end all life on this planet? Perhaps we'll be a little bit more prepared to answer that choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's
You think
that's
it'll be
why I
here? You think it'll be in the next few years when we see him?
oh yeah, oh yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think it can last. But then again, it's gone a lot longer than I thought it was going to go, James. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
um it all depends on us. It doesn't depend on Maitreya. Most we don't understand, and we won't understand until Maitreya teaches us the laws of life, about the laws that he's working within, which one of them is the law of free will. So these masters don't infringe upon our free will, even if it's to help us out. They cannot infringe our free will at all. It's
Do you know
better
why
for,
that is?
yeah, because it harms you because
Okay.
it's better for you to learn the lesson on your own than it is for somebody to help you. Now, it doesn't mean they can't help you out, right? But for instance, um, one of the things that Ben talked about, how masters teach their disciples when they're really in a close relationship, like Ben had. Ben was asking his master all sorts of questions about esotericism, about life, about Maitreya, perhaps, or whatever. And Ben's master started answering the question the same way. He goes, "That's it exactly." And then a little while later, Ben asked another question. He goes, "Oh, that's it exactly." And then he asked another question, and Ben's master said, "Oh, that's it exactly." And then he asked another question. And he said, "Oh, that's it exactly." Well, then Ben started to go, "Why does he keep answering the same question, the same or different questions the same way, right?"
Same answer. Yeah.
And then once he had that thought, his master said, "That's it exactly as you see it." We have to see, we don't understand exactly how divine we really are, how we are really responsible for ourselves in this way, right? How autonomous we really are, how special we really are, even how unique we really are, and yet we all impose our will on other people. And in so doing, we harm that person. We don't think we are doing anything harmful, but we are harming that person. These masters don't harm us at all. So if it's better for you to not be helped at a situation, they will not help you. If it's better for you to not be healed of a disease because you need to learn the whatever it is that the disease is teaching you, they won't heal you. You know what I mean? They'll let you die. And because they know that you're going to come back in a different lifetime and you'll be just fine and dandy, right? So Maitreya, when he's being interviewed on TV or on a podcast, perhaps, or giving a talk or something, if the question does not come up about, let's say, the principle of sharing, how can he talk about the principle of sharing? He can't. So the representative of the media, wherever it is, see, Maitreya is not going to say anything that's going to be recognized as being him until whoever's asking him the question asks him a question that it causes that answer, right? Because whoever that media representative is that's representing humanity, if they don't ask him a question that brings that out, then that means humanity is not ready yet. So he'll just answer whatever question they ask him.
So if they ask him if he was Maitreya, would he answer it and say
no?
Yes?
Not until the day of declaration. He will say he won't say yes. He won't say no. But at the same time,
kind of ignore it or change the subject.
Yeah, or just say it in a way that it's not answering it yes or no.
Answering without answering. Yeah.
Or the other thing he can do too is he can see that thought coming up in their mind and remove it from their mind.
Oh wow!
Or keep even they've talked about this. I don't know if you ever read the Essene, the Gospel of Truth, or think is what it is. It's about it's the Dead Sea. It was copied from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's a lot about the life of Jesus and some different teachings that Jesus taught that isn't in the Bible. But one of the things that was said that these people would have these questions to ask Jesus, and once they got around Jesus, they totally forgot the question. And then once he left, they're like, "Oh crap, I forgot to ask him that question." And so it's just it wasn't like he physically removed it from their thought. It was just they stopped thinking about it, I guess, is my point. So if Maitreya doesn't want the question to be asked, it won't be asked.
Okay.
But then again, if the representative of the media does not ask him a question in a way that he's can answer it, then he won't ask it in that way or answer it in that way. So and it's kind of like even with me with my podcast. I mean, I'm not a master by any stretch, but I only talk about things that people ask me typically. Right. So it's like, if the question doesn't come up, then I don't really answer it. So the times I might go through five videos in a row where I'm talking about the Antichrist, it's only because I keep getting questions about the Antichrist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's why when I write a question, I won't even look for a response. I'll just wait for the next video.
Yeah. It's easier for me to do that than typing it all out, but
I prefer it. I like it like that, actually.
Yeah. Now, I don't want you to forget your questions. So did you have any other questions that you were going to ask me?
Yeah, I got basically a 2-part question before we wrap it up.
Sure.
All right. So basically, I saw Blavatsky. She referred to the God of Israel as hateful, spiteful deity.
Mm-hmm.
Do they believe that he is real? And then also, I saw Bailey refer to Lucifer as the savior or everlasting messenger. But you already described that they believe that was like Lucifer wasn't like a real person, basically like a spirit or something.
Okay, so Lucifer.
So do they believe both of them are real? Is what I'm asking.
Well, Blavatsky. If I had to guess, what Blavatsky was talking about was the Old Testament God of Israel.
Okay.
Is is spiteful, angry in this, but it's not a real, there's no God of Israel. There's divinity and life throughout cosmos in all aspects of that, but it has not, but the God of Israel that the early Jews talked about being this eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which really is about
Yeah.
karma, you know what I mean? But talking about it in that way and all the,
Yeah.
this is
Jealous,
an
angry God.
abomination. Yeah, yeah. Um, I think it's a myth, to be honest. And they were trying to understand that there's a higher consciousness in a way. Perhaps Moses and some of these other prophets were telling him, and they were the way that they were writing it out or describing it to him, perhaps symbolically created that. But I think it's just an extension of the other myths of Greece or Norse gods or Roman gods or whatever, right? But so there isn't a God of Israel and nothing else, right? That would mean that there was no other God for anybody else, right? I mean, now Lucifer in and of itself is a topic that I don't necessarily like to talk about because it triggers people, okay? But
Okay.
Lucifer really is Latin for bringer of light. That's
Yeah.
all it
Light
means,
bearer.
okay? Now, I am smart enough, I'm not a smart guy, but I'm smart enough to understand that words do change meaning for people depending upon the time, right? So it's changed its meaning. So the popular view of Lucifer means the devil, right?
Yeah.
So for me to go on and talk about Lucifer and have titles of Lucifer and have a channel named Lucifer, people would be like, he's talking about the devil,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you know what I mean? But yet I'm not. That's why I don't even talk about it, because it really doesn't mean anything other than it's Latin for light bearer, and it had nothing to do with what people think it means. So according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, Lucifer means the oversoul of humanity that ensouls all of we're individualized, but we're really individualized souls of one greater soul. That oversoul, from what they were describing in the Bible, is Lucifer. So that's what they were talking about in the in the Old Testament of Lucifer, was the oversoul of humanity, not some fallen angel out of. So that symbol of Satan or the devil falling and rather rule in hell than serve in heaven kind of deal was a symbol for when humanity started to incarnate as an early animal man. The act of eating the apple, which is a very possessive type of act, right? Possession meaning attachment, right?
Yeah.
What is the most possessive thing that you can do is to eat something, right? So to eat the apple of knowledge is a very possessive act. We became attached to the knowledge of our individuality, I guess, is really what it makes sense to me, right? So the Garden of Eden was when our souls hadn't started to incarnate on this planet yet. We were one soul. We hadn't individualized as humanity, but it's humanity's soul. And as we started to individualize, we took the bite out of the apple. We were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and all the shame that came with it, right? So, and those kind of things, to where we became early animal man. And then the path of the return that Jesus talked about, the prodigal son, is not the path of the sinner. It's the path of humanity going through all the stuff that you got to go through in order to become a master, and then eventually becoming a master. That was what that symbol, that story, that parable that he was talking about. But
Okay.
the joke that I know about, the only joke I know about Adam and Eve is God said to Adam, "Hey, I got the perfect girl for you. She loves sports. She'll cook for you. She won't complain. She's dead sexy. She's gorgeous, all that kind of stuff." And he goes, "Whew, how much is that going to cost me?" And he goes, "It's going to cost you an arm and a leg." He goes, "Well, then what can I get for one rib?" Anyway, but anyway, there wasn't an actual Garden of Eden with a naked Eve and a naked Adam, and we all came from that. It's a
Uh,
symbol. It's a symbol of how we incarnated, I guess. And so
yeah. See,
I
and
don't,
as Christians, we obviously believe the complete opposite. But I think it's good
correct.
when people with different beliefs can come together and
Yeah.
have a productive conversation. And
And that's why,
I'm
when
just curious
yeah,
what
and
your thoughts were on it.
if you talk to an atheist or an atheist scientist who just thinks life spontaneously just came out of nowhere,
Nowhere, yeah.
I would disagree with that too.
Oh
That
yeah.
there's this random act that just happened.
Yeah, it does.
You
It
know,
doesn't make sense at all.
no, but
Nothing came out of nothing, basically.
and then you
They
talk to
say.
some scientists that are perhaps more open-minded and they say, well, I just don't know how it started. I mean, and that kind of, or I don't, there's no, like they might say, well, there's no evidence of God. Well, there's evidence of God everywhere.
And see, I've also heard people say the Big Bang will say there's no evidence for God, but I'm like, for me as a Christian, that just I go back to the verse when he said, "Let there be light," and for me, that's the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, I can see that too. You know what I mean? But I wasn't there. I don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know
Nobody was.
I
Yeah,
don't know if the Big Bang started that way. I don't know.
yeah.
Now,
Nobody. Yeah, exactly.
I can only guess or I can only regurgitate what I've
Yeah,
read in the Alice Bailey teachings, but then at the same time, that would be the same as somebody regurgitating what they read in the Bible.
yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah,
So to me, there's no difference between that. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
anyway, but yeah, in terms of, like I said, in terms of the word Lucifer, I kind of steer clear of that because like I said, it's taken on a whole different connotation. And
yeah,
in so doing, it's, I can sit there and scream against the wind all I want, but it's not going to do any good. I mean, because
yeah,
that's what people believe now, right? So it is what it is,
yeah. Oh yeah.
you know.
Yeah, like I said, it's always good when people with different backgrounds and beliefs can come together and have a good conversation. I've always been like that, even though I have my beliefs. I'm like, I can still have a conversation with anybody about any religion or any topic. Or I'm a critical thinker. I like talking to other people, and even if it's about a belief I don't believe myself. So I've just always been that way. But yeah, I think that was man, that was like another great interview. That was, oh wow, that was already 2 hours. 2 hours, 2 minutes. You still there? Ooh, I think did I lose you? I think I don't know. He's still in here, but I think maybe I don't know what happened. Something happened. All right, let me give him a minute. Let me see if he. I'll drop the link again real quick, Gary, so you can come back in if you have any comments to wrap it up. And if your thing's not working, you don't join it back. That's also okay too. I'm sure we'll talk again at some point down the line. But I'll give you a few minutes to see. There he goes.
Hey, are you there?
Yep, got you back. All right.
Yeah, it just all of a sudden just shut down.
Okay. Yeah, I was basically saying I'm a critical thinker, and then I've always been able to have conversations, even with people that have different beliefs than me. I think that's good for people to do.
Absolutely, man. I respect you immensely
Oh,
for what
thank
you
you.
do.
Thank you.
Absolutely, 100%. And I look forward to these interviews. Hopefully, maybe we can do another one.
That's what I
I
was just
love it.
saying. I said I'm sure we'll do a part 3 at some point. Who knows? Maybe something will happen in the news or something. Yeah, you never know.
At the very least, hopefully, I've shared a little bit of my hope with people that they don't feel quite as downhearted about the future if they're feeling downhearted. Hopefully, if you have this interpretation of Maitreya in a very fearful way, hopefully I've helped diminish a little bit of the fear. I can't say I can do it all the way, but hopefully I've helped in that regard.
Yeah.
I don't think you have anything to fear when it comes to Maitreya. You talked about Kathleen Keating, and I don't think anybody has anything to fear with Maitreya. And really make up your mind when you see him and you recognize him on TV and you hear what he has to say. And then if you still don't understand or don't not understand, but if you still don't know what to make of what he says, wait for us to try the principle of sharing and see if it works. And if it works, then there might be something to what he's saying. That's the way I would say it. But,
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, this is a great interview. And
uh,
Stefan says he has no more questions. So yeah,
did I answer all your questions, James?
yeah, you definitely did for sure. Yeah, that was another great interview. Thanks for coming back, Gary.
Likewise. Thank you for inviting me anytime. If you want anytime. But anyway,
Yeah, you'll see me in your comments like usual. I watch all your videos you put out, and
you always
we'll
say,
definitely do this again at some point.
I forgot to ask you this one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
But anyway, thank you again, James. And if I don't speak to you before Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas holiday for sure.
Yeah, one last thing. Stefan
Yeah.
said this kind of discussion won't even be allowed on most Christian channels. Yeah, that's very true. Just like I said, I have an open mind and I can talk to people that have different beliefs than me, and I can do it. I don't know. People are just rude, and I don't know. They're too set in their own ways, and I don't know what it is. But I've always been able to just have an open mind and have conversations with anybody. So yeah, that's definitely true, Stefan. But yeah, Gary, you too. Have a good Christmas, and yeah, we'll I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for coming back, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you. You have a good
All right,
day.
Gary, and all right,
All right,
Stefan. I'll see you tomorrow, probably at 3 for the normal.
All right.
But all right, guys, yeah, that was a good good interview. I'll see you guys next time. All right, guys. God bless.